Okay, well, what I want to talk about today um, started with a letter that I actually got yesterday. And like most good letters, and this is true, this letter begins with a quote from Soren Kierkegaard. They usually do, right? And it says, I didn't know this quote, but probably you do. It says, life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. And so, in that spirit, what I want to do is talk about Exponam technology by looking backwards 50 years and then seeing if we can use that to kind of understand the future a little better than maybe Kierkegaard would have allowed. And so, I start with a question, which is actually reminiscent of that photo right there. It's from about that era. How much computer tech from 1972 is still in widespread use today? And I remember 1972 really vividly, and I remember paper tape and punch cards and drum drives. I remember teletypes and actual core memory that you could hear flipping, and even vacuum tubes. In upstate New York, we still had those sorts of things. In 1972, the PDP-11 and the Honeywell 6000 had just come out a couple of year or two before, and that year, the IBM 370 and the fabled Xerox Alto came out. They were brand spanking new in 1972. And if you want to see any of those today, you can go to a computer museum and see just how dismal the past was. Um, but one thing has endured since 1972. It was the year of its introduction, and that's comma separated value files, CSV files. They and their brethren, pipe delimited and tab delimited, and even the fixed field width files, they're all from around 1972. And it is true that they went on an evolutionary track where they eventually were firmed up with standards like RFC 1480. That was about 15 years ago. And then just 6 years ago, they tried to breathe some more life into it with RFC 7111. But we've had a good almost 50 years of CSV files. And I really wondered, why are they so popular? Um, and it could be a coincidence, but another holdover from 1972 is the C programming language. That's when Dennis Ritchie evolved it out of B, if you care about these things, and came up with a language that we all know as C today. And that grew up at the time in the world of the PDP-7 and PDP-11. Um, good times, right? A long time ago. And by 78, KNR-C was out, and then we firmed up in the course of the 80s what most developers today would recognize as ANSI-C or C89. But anybody along that era would have known as a developer that there were a couple of routines that were just like your best friends when you were dealing with data, when you were dealing with CSV files, and they were fprintf and fscanf. Anybody who could write a C program could interoperate with these files. And so how great is that? You could create or read delimited files. They were human readable when they were at rest. If you had an IMS database, or maybe you were dealing with RDB or with DB2, you could pull data out of them, pop them into a CSV file, exchange it, pull it into some other system. It became the data interchange standard for the world, and it still is. And I've really wondered how many technologies from 50 years ago are relevant today? Not many. And is CSV one that we should hang on to? And so I think a good way to look at that, and again, borrowing from Mr. Kierkegaard, is another bit of evolution, and that's digital content. And we don't have to go as far back for that. We only have to go about 30 years. And that's when Adobe started working on what we all know as PDF with the carousel object system. And it had a much faster track than what we've seen with the RFCs around CSV files. By 2008, it was an ISO standard, ISO 32000. And along the way, along those 15, 16-year arc, PDF acquired all kinds of capabilities. It got metadata, it got compression and encryption, it got the ability to be signed, it got rich media types, got way more. And it became the ubiquitous standard for exchanging content. And it was in two different ways. For end user purposes, if I want to get you something, I want to know that you can read it, I give you a PDF. But even for headless exchange of data, for data interchange between services, structured data using form fields has been a standard ever since form fields came out. So PDF managed to become a standard that was relevant with all these wonderful traits and characteristics. And even to the point where it is the adopted standard by the Library of Congress, the PDFA archive, when the Library of Congress thinks about sustainability of digital formats, chooses the archive version of PDF as best edition. That's the top choice standard. And it's for all those reasons that I just listed. So we compare this to our 50-year-old CSV file, which is error prone, very easy to pipe bad data into a CSV file. There's no schema with it, so you have no idea what the types even are. You just have to sort of infer it from what's in there. It's often ambiguous. If I have a field that is a Y, is it a Boolean yes? Is it just a Y? Does it stand for yellow? No meaning associated with it. You have to parse the fields when you read them in, and parsing can lead to all kinds of problems, and also additional ambiguities, like exactly which time zone were you talking about and which Unicode variant was it. They're terribly optimized for read operations. If you have a million rows in a CSV file, and I say I want the 500,000th one, good luck. They're not compressed by themselves, they're not secure, and they carry no provenance, or what data scientists like to call lineage. So we look at how we exchange content today, digital content. It's modern, it's useful, and it's relevant. We look at the world of data exchange with CSV and all of its friends, and they're deplorable. And this was the reason why we came up with the Exponam.big file format, because we want to bring all those modern characteristics to data that the world of content has enjoyed for almost 30 years. We want a 21st century data file format that would allow us to take rich data, multiple tables of data, not just a single table view like CSV has. And we want it to be extremely optimized for read operations, extremely compressed so that we exchange it quickly. And if it's sitting at rest in the cloud or in a data center, it's doing so with a minimum of cost carried with it. We want it to be secure. We want to benefit from today's highest level of encryption that we're allowed to use domestically for export grade encryption. And we also want it to be tamper proof. We want to be able to detect if it's been altered. A CSV file sitting at rest on somebody's hard drive, somebody can just walk up and change the data. That really shouldn't be in the modern era. I can't do that with a PDF file, at least not with a signed and encrypted PDF file. I shouldn't be able to do that with data. And last, data doesn't exist in a vacuum. It was produced by somebody, and it may have been derivative of multiple upstream systems. It should carry that lineage with it. And there are also often terms of use around data or information about its history, the story of that data, or sometimes it's multiple narratives. The data file should carry all of that integral with it, inseparable from it. The data should be immutable. It should be tamper-proof. The Exponam.big file was invented to carry all of those traits forward, and especially be as useful as PDF, and certainly even more useful than any of the other data exchange formats that are available for end user distribution of data and headless exchange of data or data interchange operations. So we'll get into more details about the Exponam.big file format in a future session, but that's the reason for its origin. And also, I hope you all get to enjoy many letters from Soren Kierkegaard yourself. Thank you.